Every parent knows the weight of rejection when you can't provide for your child. Every job interview that ends with "we'll call you" feels like another door closing on your family's future. Marcus Whitfield stood outside the gleaming towers of Meridian Industries, his daughter's small hand in his, knowing he didn't belong at this corporate gala. For 6 months, he'd collected rejection letters like battle scars, each one deepening the worry lines around his eyes. But when CEO Victoria Meridian's composed speech crumbled into a mother's desperate plea for her missing son, something shifted in that ballroom. Marcus saw what others missed, a detail only a parent would notice. What made this unemployed single father approach one of the most powerful women in the city? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the worn curtains of Marcus Whitfield's modest apartment, illuminating the threadbare patches on his only suit jacket. He stood before the cracked mirror in his bedroom, attempting to smooth out wrinkles that had settled into the fabric like permanent residents. His fingers trembled slightly as he fastened the buttons, each one a small act of determination against the tide of hopelessness that threatened to overwhelm him. "Daddy, you missed a spot," Emma's voice piped up from the doorway. His 7-year-old daughter padded across the room in her socked feet, carrying a lint roller she'd retrieved from the hall closet. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, sparkled with a wisdom beyond her years. Marcus knelt down to her level, accepting the lint roller with a grateful smile. "What would I do without my assistant?" "Probably go out with fuzzy clothes," Emma replied matter-of-factly, watching as he ran the roller over his jacket. "Are these grandpa's?" She pointed to the sterling silver cufflinks he'd set on the dresser, the only truly elegant items in his possession. Marcus picked them up, feeling their familiar weight in his palm. "They are." He wore them to his job at the factory every day for 30 years, said they reminded him that even ordinary people deserve a touch of dignity. Emma's small fingers helped guide the cufflinks through his shirt cuffs, her concentration intense. "Mummy used to say Grandpa was the smartest man she knew." "He was," Marcus agreed, his throat tightening at the mention of Sarah. 2 years had passed since cancer had stolen her from them, but Emma still spoke of her mother with the casual certainty of a child who believed love transcended absence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across their living room as Marcus gathered his wallet and keys. The invitation to the Meridian Industries gala lay on the kitchen counter, its gold embossing a mockery of their cramped apartment. Jake Morrison, his former colleague at Autotech, had pressed the tickets into his hands the week before. "My wife's got the flu, and these charity tickets cost me $500, Jake had said. "Take Emma. Show her how the other half lives. Besides, you never know who you might meet." Marcus had almost refused. The last thing he needed was to parade his failures before the city's elite. But Emma had overheard, and her excitement about attending a princess party had overcome his reluctance. "Mrs. Chen," Emma called out as they knocked on their neighbor's door. The elderly woman appeared, her kind face creasing into a smile at the sight of them. "My, don't you both look wonderful," Mrs. Chen said, though Marcus caught the flicker of concern in her eyes as she took in his dated suit. She'd been their rock since Sarah's death, watching Emma after school while Marcus attended interviews that led nowhere. "The gala should end by 9, Marcus explained, handing her Emma's backpack. "Her homework's done, and there's leftover pasta." "In Marcus Whitfield, I've been watching this little angel for 2 years. Go!" Mrs. Chen shooed them toward the elevator. "And try to enjoy yourself. You deserve a night of beauty." The cab ride to Meridian Industries took them through neighborhoods that grew progressively more affluent, the buildings climbing higher and the cars becoming sleeker. Emma pressed her nose against the window, providing commentary on everything, from the fountains to the doormen standing like sentinels outside luxury hotels. "Are we poor, Daddy?" she asked suddenly, her breath fogging the glass. Marcus's hands tightened on his knees. He'd known this question would come eventually, but knowing hadn't prepared him for the knife twist of shame it brought. "We have everything. We need, he said carefully, a home, food, each other. That makes us rich in the ways that matter. Emma seemed to consider this, then nodded. And we have Mrs. Chen, and my drawings, and Mommy's recipes. Exactly right. The Meridian Industries tower loomed before them like a glass and steel monument to corporate power. Marcus paid the cab driver, wincing at the fare, and helped Emma onto the sidewalk. She smoothed down her best dress, a navy blue hand-me-down, from Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, and slipped her hand into his. "You look handsome, Daddy," she whispered as they approached the entrance, "like a prince in my storybooks." Marcus squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering faith in him. 6 months of rejection letters hadn't dimmed her belief that her father could do anything. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his father's cufflinks one final time, and led his daughter into a world where they didn't belong, carrying nothing but hope and the fading echo of better days. The ballroom doors opened onto a scene from another universe. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, polished to mirror perfection. Servers in crisp uniforms glided between clusters of guests, bearing trays of champagne, and canapes that probably cost more than Marcus's weekly grocery budget. The air itself felt different here, cooler, cleaner, scented with subtle perfume and possibility. Emma's grip on his hand tightened. "It's like a castle," she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Marcus guided her toward a less crowded corner, acutely aware of how his dated suit stood out among the designer tuxedos and cocktail dresses. Several heads turned as they passed, expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. He recognized the look, the same one he'd seen on interviewers' faces when they glanced at his resume, and saw the 2-year gap since Autotech's downsizing. "Why don't you draw for a bit?" Marcus suggested, spotting an empty cocktail table near a towering floral arrangement. He'd brought Emma's sketchbook and colored pencils, knowing she'd need an anchor in this sea of strangers. Emma climbed onto a chair, already pulling out her supplies. "I'm going to draw the ceiling," she announced. "It looks like heaven." While Emma sketched, Marcus forced himself to mingle. He'd learned the choreography of networking events during his engineering days: firm handshake, confident smile, elevator, pitch at the ready. But those skills felt rusty now, corroded by months of rejection. Marcus Whitfield. He turned to find David Chen from his Autotech days, looking prosperous in a perfectly tailored suit. They'd worked on the same development team before the layoffs. David. Marcus shook his hand, noting the Rolex that hadn't been there 2 years ago. "You're looking well." "Landed at Quantum Solutions right after the downsizing," David said, his eyes sliding over Marcus's appearance. "Senior management now. You?" Still exploring opportunities. The phrase had become automatic, a shield against pity. David's smile turned uncomfortable. "Well, keep at it. Something will turn up." He glanced over Marcus's shoulder, already looking for an escape. "I should find my wife. Good luck." Marcus watched him disappear into the crowd, adding another small humiliation to his collection. He drifted past conversation circles, catching fragments about quarterly projections and vacation homes, feeling more invisible with each passing moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice rang out over the sound system, "please welcome our host. For this evening, Meridian Industries CEO Victoria Meridian." The crowd shifted toward the stage, like iron filings to a magnet. Marcus made his way back to Emma, who had abandoned her drawing to watch the woman ascending the platform. Victoria Meridian commanded attention without demanding it. She moved with the unconscious grace of someone accustomed to being watched, her midnight blue gown managing to be both elegant and authoritative. Her auburn hair was swept into a sophisticated chignon, and her jewelry spoke of understated wealth. But it was her presence that dominated the room, an aura of controlled power that made the air around her seem charged. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. Welcome to Meridian Industries' annual charity gala. Your generosity tonight will support our city's educational initiatives, ensuring that every child has access to the tools they need to succeed. Her speech unfolded with practiced precision. She cited statistics about their record-breaking quarter, praised key executives by name, outlined their vision for expansion. Marcus found himself studying her technique, the way she made eye contact with different sections of the crowd, how she modulated her tone to emphasize certain points. This was a woman who had turned public speaking into an art form. "The sad lady," Emma whispered, holding up her sketchbook. Marcus glanced down at his daughter's drawing. With a child's intuitive grasp of emotion, Emma had captured something in Victoria's face that her polished presentation obscured. There was a tightness around the sketched eyes, a downward turn to the mouth that suggested grief held carefully in check. "Why do you think she's sad?" Marcus asked quietly. Emma shrugged. "Her smile doesn't match her eyes, like Mrs. Patterson at school when her cat died." On stage, Victoria had moved on to discussing their community partnerships when her assistant hurried up the side steps, clearly flustered. She carried a leather portfolio, fumbling with papers that scattered slightly in her haste. Victoria's rhythm faltered for just a moment as she watched her assistant scramble to collect the note cards. "I apologize," Victoria said, her composure intact despite the interruption. "It seems my remarks have decided to take flight." Polite laughter rippled through the audience. Victoria continued without the cards, her delivery smooth but somehow different now, more personal, less rehearsed. "As many of you know, Meridian Industries has always been more than a business to me. It's a legacy, one I inherited from my father and hope someday to pass on to my son, Thomas." Something shifted in her voice at her son's name. The crowd, sensing the change, grew quieter. "Thomas turned 8 last month," she continued, her fingers finding the gold locket at her throat. "He wants to be an inventor, fills our house with contraptions made from cardboard and tape. His latest creation is a homework robot that he insists will revolutionize education." A few chuckles arose, but Marcus noticed how her hand trembled slightly as she touched the locket. "Children see the world differently," Victoria said. "They find magic in ordinary things. They believe in impossible solutions." Her voice cracked. "On the last word, they trust that the people who love them will always keep them safe." The assistant had reached the podium now, holding out the recovered cards, but Victoria waved her away. The mask of corporate control was slipping, revealing something raw underneath. 48 hours ago," she said, each word seeming to cost her, "my Thomas disappeared from his school. The security footage shows nothing. The police have leads they're pursuing. His father, my ex-husband, claims ignorance. And I stand here, in this beautiful room, surrounded by success and achievement, and none of it matters because my little boy is out there somewhere and he's afraid of the dark." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Marcus felt Emma's hand slip into his, her drawing forgotten. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, but her voice had gained strength rather than lost it. "This isn't what you came to hear. You came for promises of profit margins and market expansion. But I'm a mother first, and my child is missing, and if anyone in this room has any information, any connection, anything at all—" She stopped, seeming to realize she'd crossed some invisible line. The vulnerability vanished as quickly as it had appeared, locked away behind executive armor. But the damage was done. The most powerful woman in the city had revealed her deepest fear, and the titans of industry didn't know how to respond. Victoria's hands gripped the podium edges, her knuckles white beneath the stage lights. For a moment, she seemed to wage an internal battle between the CEO the world expected and the mother she couldn't help but be. The mother won. "Thomas has been missing since Tuesday afternoon," she continued, her voice steadier now that the truth was out. "He was in his advanced mathematics class at Pemberton Academy. His teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, says he asked to use the restroom at 2:15. Security footage shows him leaving the classroom. He never made it to the bathroom. He never made it anywhere." The crowd remained frozen, champagne flutes held mid-air, canapes forgotten on plates. Marcus noticed several people discreetly checking their phones, perhaps looking for news coverage they'd missed. The story of a billionaire's missing child should have been headlines, but Victoria had clearly managed to keep it quiet until now. The police have been professional, thorough, Victoria said. They've interviewed staff, reviewed footage, brought in specialists. They keep telling me that in custody disputes, her voice hardened. My ex-husband, Richard, insists he knows. Nothing. He's been in London all week, alibis confirmed. But Thomas heard us arguing on the phone last Sunday about visitation schedules. Richard wanted to take him to Europe for the summer. I said no. Emma pressed closer to Marcus's side. He could feel her small body trembling, responding to the anguish in Victoria's voice with a child's unfiltered empathy. The FBI has been consulted, Victoria continued. Private investigators hired. A reward of $2 million has been quietly offered. But none of that matters at 3 in the morning when I sit in Thomas's room, surrounded by his inventions, knowing he's somewhere out there, scared and alone. Her voice broke completely on the last word. The assistant made another attempt to approach, but Victoria held up a hand, stopping her. You need to understand, she said, speaking directly to the crowd now, making eye contact with individuals as if willing them to comprehend. Thomas isn't like other children. He's brilliant, yes, but he's also anxious, sensitive. He still sleeps with a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. When he's frightened, he gets small, tries to make himself invisible, hides in spaces where he feels safe. Marcus's mind began to turn, processing her words with an engineer's attention to detail. There was something in what she'd said about Thomas getting small, hiding when scared. His years at Autotech had included contracts for school renovations, updating old buildings with modern security systems. He'd learned how children thought about space differently than adults, how they found refuges in places grown-ups overlooked. The school has been searched top to bottom, Victoria was saying. Every classroom, every storage room, every corner. The grounds, the surrounding neighborhood, but Thomas is clever. Too clever sometimes. He once built a fort inside the utility closet at home, behind the water heater. It took us 6 hours to find him during a game of hide-and-seek. Several people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Marcus could read their thoughts. This was too personal, too raw for a corporate gathering. They'd come for networking and tax-deductible donations, not to witness a mother's public unraveling. Some of you have children, Victoria said, her gaze moving across the room with laser intensity. You know the fear that lives in every parent's heart, the nightmare of turning around and finding them gone, the guilt of every harsh word, every moment of impatience, every time you chose work over bedtime stories. Marcus thought of his own guilt, different in texture but familiar in weight. The guilt of rejection letters and empty bank accounts, of Emma's hand-me-down clothes and missed opportunities. But at least Emma was here, safe beside him, her warm hand in his. I stand before you as someone who has achieved what our society calls success, Victoria said. This company employs thousands. Our innovations shape industries. My signature can move markets, but I would trade it all. Every share of stock, every patent, every dollar, to have my son walk through those doors. Right now. The locket at her throat caught the light as she touched it again, a nervous gesture that seemed unconscious. Thomas gave me this for Mother's Day last year. Not bought, made. He'd saved his allowance to buy the chain, but the locket itself, he crafted in his school's makerspace. It doesn't close properly, and the engraving is crooked, but it's perfect because he made it. She opened the locket, revealing a photo too small for the audience to see clearly, but Marcus could imagine it, a school portrait, gap-toothed smile, eyes bright with possibility. His teacher says they'd been studying architecture that week, Victoria continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Learning about how buildings are designed, how they evolve over time. Pemberton Academy is over 100 years old. It's been renovated dozens of times, each generation adding layers to the original structure. Something clicked in Marcus's mind. Pemberton Academy. He'd worked on the proposal for their security upgrade at Autotech, though they'd lost the bid to a competitor. But he'd studied the blueprints, spent hours analyzing the building's quirks. The original structure from 1923, the additions in the 50s, the modern wing built in the 90s, and underneath it all, the bones of the old building, including the maintenance tunnels that connected the original steam heating system. "Please," Victoria said, and the word hung in the air like crystal about to shatter. "If anyone knows anything, has seen anything, has any connection that might help, I'm not too proud to beg. This isn't about corporate rivalry or social standing. This is about an 8-year-old boy who's afraid of the dark and just wants to come home." The assistant finally reached her, placing a gentle hand on Victoria's elbow. This time, Victoria didn't resist. She allowed herself to be guided to the side of the podium, though she remained visible to the crowd. "I apologize for disrupting your evening," she said, the CEO mask sliding partially back into place. "The gala will continue as planned. The silent auction remains open, and I hope you'll be generous in supporting our city's children. All of them deserve to feel safe." Applause began uncertainly, scattered and uncomfortable, as Victoria descended from the stage. Marcus watched her move through the crowd, which parted before her like a reluctant sea. People murmured condolences, offered vague promises of help, but kept their distance from her grief as if it might be contagious. "Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging on his sleeve, "you know something." Marcus looked down at his daughter, startled by her perception. "What makes you say that?" "Your thinking face," she said simply. "The one you get when you're solving a problem." She was right. The engineering part of his mind was already mapping Pemberton Academy's layout, remembering details from those old blueprints. The maintenance tunnels had been sealed during the renovation, officially, but sealed to adults didn't mean inaccessible to a clever, frightened child who'd been studying architecture. A child who, when scared, tried to make himself small. Marcus glanced across the room at Victoria Meridian, surrounded by people yet utterly alone in her fear. He thought of the rejection letters in his kitchen drawer, the months of being told. He had nothing to offer, but maybe, just maybe, his particular knowledge, born from a failed contract and a father's understanding of frightened children, was exactly what she needed. "Come on," he told Emma, lifting her from her chair. "We need to talk to someone." "The sad lady?" "Yes," Marcus said, squaring his shoulders beneath his borrowed suit. "The sad lady." The gala continued around them in muted tones, conversations resuming with the careful politeness of people pretending they hadn't just witnessed something profoundly uncomfortable. Servers resumed their circulation. The quartet in the corner began playing again, but the atmosphere had shifted. The glittering evening had been cracked open, revealing something raw beneath its polished surface. Marcus held Emma's hand as they navigated through the crowd toward Victoria. She stood near a massive floral arrangement, surrounded by a small cluster of people who seemed unsure whether to offer comfort or conduct business. Her assistant hovered protectively nearby, intercepting anyone who appeared too eager to approach. "Sir, perhaps this isn't the best time." A security guard materialized in Marcus's path, his earpiece and dark suit marking him as private security rather than building personnel. His eyes swept over Marcus's dated attire with professional assessment. "Please," Marcus said quietly, "I might have information about her son." The guard's expression didn't change. "Many people think they have information. If you'd like to leave your contact details with Ms. Meridian's assistant. Daddy knows about buildings." Emma piped up, her clear voice cutting through the ambient noise. "He makes them safe for children." Something in her innocent certainty must have reached Victoria because she turned toward them, up close. Marcus could see the careful makeup couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes, the tight lines of exhaustion around her mouth. Her gaze dropped to Emma, and her expression softened fractionally. "Hello," Victoria said to Emma, her voice gentler than the commanding tone from the podium. "That's a beautiful dress." "Thank you," Emma replied with 7-year-old directness. "You're sad about your little boy." "My daddy can help." Victoria's eyes lifted to Marcus, taking in his appearance with the same evaluating look he'd seen too many times in interviews. He saw her begin to dismiss him, another well-meaning stranger with false hope to offer. "Miss Meridian," Marcus said quickly before she could turn away. "The maintenance tunnels under Pemberton Academy, from the original 1923 heating system. They were supposed to be sealed during the 98 renovation, but the contractor cut corners, left access points behind utility panels." Victoria went very still. Behind her, the assistant stepped forward. "How could you possibly know that?" "I worked on the security upgrade proposal for Pemberton 2 years ago. Autotech Industries. We didn't get the contract, but I spent 3 weeks studying those buildings." Marcus kept his eyes on Victoria. "You said Thomas gets small when he's scared. Hides in spaces where he feels safe. You also said he'd been studying architecture, how buildings evolve. A bright kid like that would notice things adults miss." "The police searched everywhere," the assistant interjected, her tone dismissive. "Professional search teams with thermal imaging dogs, did they check behind the utility panel in the northeast stairwell?" Marcus interrupted gently. "Second floor, marked electrical hazard, even though it hasn't housed electrical systems since the 50s. The panel looks sealed, but the screws are cosmetic. It pulls right off if you know where to press." Victoria's hand found her locket again. "How do you know the screws are cosmetic?" "Because I found them during my survey. Made a note in my report about the security risk. A small child who felt threatened, who knew about old buildings having hidden spaces, who wanted to disappear." Marcus trailed off, letting her complete the thought. "The police said they checked every access point," Victoria said, but doubt had crept into her voice. "They checked every documented access point," Marcus corrected. "But those tunnels run under the entire original structure. They're not dangerous, just old steam pipes, mostly removed now. Dark, yes, but dry and actually warm from the modern heating running parallel. To a scared kid, it might feel safer than facing whatever frightened him." The security guard had activated his earpiece, relaying Marcus's information in low, urgent tones. Victoria studied Marcus with laser focus, CEO evaluation mixed with desperate mother's hope. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus Whitfield." He reached for his wallet, pulling out one of his old Autotech business cards, the ones he'd kept out of stubborn pride. "Senior Systems Analyst. Former, actually. The company downsized 2 years. Ego?" Victoria took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. "Mr. Whitfield, if you're wrong, then you've wasted an hour checking," Marcus said simply. "But if I'm right, Thomas has been hiding in those tunnels for 2 days. He's probably hungry, definitely scared, but if he found the old maintenance alcove near the boiler room intersection, he'd have overhead light from the ventilation grates." "You seem very certain," the assistant said, suspicion clear in her tone. Marcus felt Emma squeeze his hand. He drew strength from her touch, from 2 years of being her sole protector and provider. "I'm a father," he said. "I know how children think when they're scared. They don't run far. They burrow deep, somewhere that feels protected, but where they can still hear familiar voices. Those tunnels would carry sound from the classrooms above. He'd hear people looking for him, calling his name, but if he was scared enough to hide in the first place, he wouldn't answer," Victoria finished, understanding flooding her features. "Oh God, he'd hear us but be too frightened to come out, just like the time with the water heater fort." She turned to her security chief, who had appeared at her elbow. "Get a team to Pemberton Academy immediately. Northeast stairwell, 2nd floor. And bring bolt cutters for any panels that won't open easily." She paused, then looked back at Marcus. "You're coming with us." "Ms. Meridian," the assistant protested, "we don't know this man. He could be—" "He's the first person in 48 hours to offer a concrete lead that makes sense." Victoria cut her off. She addressed Marcus directly. I'll need you to show them exactly where to look. Will you come? Marcus glanced down at Emma, torn between the opportunity to help and his responsibility to his daughter. Victoria followed his gaze. Bring her, she said softly. Andrea will stay with her in the car. Won't you, Andrea? The assistant, Andrea, looked like she wanted to protest further, but nodded reluctantly. I want to help too, Emma said firmly. Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, a gesture that seemed to surprise her security detail. You already have helped, she told Emma. You brought your daddy to me. Now I need him to help find Thomas, but I promise he'll be safe, and Andrea has games on her phone. Will that be okay? Emma studied Victoria with that discerning child's gaze. You'll bring your boy home? I hope so, Victoria said, her voice catching slightly. Emma nodded solemnly. Then it's okay. Daddy's good at finding things. He found Mum's wedding ring when everyone said it was gone forever. Victoria stood, blinking rapidly. She extended her hand to Marcus, CEO firm despite the circumstances. Mr. Whitfield, I'm putting my faith in you. Please don't let it be misplaced. Marcus shook her hand, feeling the weight of her desperation and his own years of perceived failure. Let's go find your son, Miss Meridian. The convoy of black SUVs moved through the city streets with urgent precision, their emergency lights creating ribbons of red and blue against the darkened buildings. Marcus sat in the back of the lead vehicle, Victoria beside him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The space between them hummed with tension and unspoken hope. Tell me everything, Victoria said as they turned onto Pemberton Academy's tree-lined drive. Every detail you remember about those tunnels. Marcus closed his eyes, pulling up the mental blueprints he'd studied 2 years ago. The original heating system was state-of-the-art for 1923. Cast iron pipes, asbestos-wrapped, all removed in the 80s, of course. But they left the tunnel infrastructure because it would have meant tearing up the foundation. Easier to just seal the access points and run new systems through the walls. But they didn't seal them properly, Victoria prompted. The contractor, Brennan Construction, was notorious for cutting corners. They went bankrupt 6 months after the Pemberton job. Marcus opened his eyes as they pulled up to the school's Gothic entrance. The tunnels form a grid under the original building. Main arteries are about 4 feet wide, 3 feet high. A child could move through them easily, an adult would have to crouch. The parking lot was already crowded with police cars, their radios crackling with updates. A tall man in an FBI windbreaker approached as they exited the vehicle. Ms. Meridian, I appreciate your urgency, but we need to coordinate with the existing search. Agent Cooper, this is Marcus Whitfield, Victoria interrupted. He has specific knowledge of undocumented access points in the building. I want him with the search team. Cooper's skeptical gaze swept over Marcus. Sir, I understand. You want to help, but we have protocols. I worked on this building, Marcus said firmly. I can show you exactly where to look, or we can waste another hour while you verify my credentials. Which would you prefer? Victoria placed a hand on Cooper's arm. Please, we've tried your protocols for 2 days. Cooper hesitated, then nodded. Curtly. Fine, but he stays with Officer Martinez at all times. They moved through the school's marble entrance hall, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The building felt different at night. Shadows pooling in corners, the cheerful classroom decorations taking on an eerie quality in the emergency lighting. Marcus led them up the northeast stairwell, his memory mapping each turn. Here, he said, stopping at a section of wall that looked identical to every other. The utility panel bore warnings about electrical hazards, its paint job matching the aged walls perfectly. See the screws. They're not actually anchored into anything, officer. Martinez produced a toolkit, working the screws carefully. They came out too easily, confirming Marcus's assessment. The panel swung open, revealing a dark space beyond. Jesus, Cooper muttered. We checked every documented access. This isn't on any blueprint we have, because it was added during the 1952 renovation, then forgotten, Marcus explained. I only found it because I was comparing architectural surveys from different decades. Martinez shone his flashlight into the opening. The beam revealed a narrow passage dropping down to the tunnel system below. Scratch marks in the dust suggested recent disturbance. Someone's been here, Martinez said grimly. Victoria made a sound, half gasp, half sob. Thomas? Cooper was already on his radio, calling for the tactical team. We need to proceed carefully. If the boy's down there, we don't want to spook him further. Let me go. Victoria stepped forward. He knows my voice. He'll come to me. Absolutely not, Cooper said. We don't know the structural integrity. I'll go, Marcus interrupted. Everyone turned to stare at him. I'm smaller than your tactical team, less threatening than uniformed officers. I know the tunnel layout, and he glanced at Victoria. I understand scared children. Marcus, no, Victoria protested, even as hope flared in her eyes. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. He thought of Emma, safe in the car with Andrea, and what he'd want someone to do if she were lost and frightened. Agent Cooper, I assume you have safety equipment. 20 minutes later, Marcus wore a borrowed FBI vest and helmet with a mounted light. A radio crackled at his hip, and Martinez had shown him how to use the emergency beacon if needed. Victoria stood by the access panel, her composure barely maintained. Thomas is small for his age, she said quietly. Dark hair, hazel eyes. He'll be wearing his school uniform, navy blazer, grey pants. His favorite toy is a small robot he built himself. He might have it with him. I'll find him, Marcus promised, meaning it. The descent into the tunnels was awkward, requiring him to twist through the narrow opening. His helmet light carved through the darkness, revealing the cramped passages he'd only seen on paper. The air was stale but warm, just as he'd predicted. Pipes ran along the ceiling, wrapped in modern insulation. Marcus, do you copy? Cooper's voice crackled through the radio. Clear, Marcus responded, beginning to move through the tunnel. His knees protested the crouch position, but he pressed forward, following the main artery toward the boiler room. Intersection. The tunnels were a maze, branching off in multiple directions. Marcus navigated by memory and instinct, pausing periodically to listen. Somewhere in this darkness was a terrified child who'd been hiding for 2 days. Thomas? He called softly. Thomas, my name is Marcus. Your mom sent me to find you. She's waiting upstairs. Silence answered him, but Marcus continued moving, checking each alcove and side passage. His light caught something, a candy wrapper, the kind the school vending machine stocked. Fresh. Getting warmer, he muttered, keying his radio. Found evidence. Northeast section, heading toward the old boiler room. He rounded a corner and his light illuminated a wider section where several tunnels met. The old boiler room intersection, and there, huddled in a maintenance alcove just as Marcus had predicted, was a small figure. Thomas Meridian looked even younger than 8, curled into himself with his school blazer pulled over his head like a makeshift tent. Clutched in his arms was indeed a small mechanical robot, its metal surface catching the light. The boy's eyes, when they met Marcus's, were wide with terror and exhaustion. Hey there, Marcus said softly, staying where he was. You must be Thomas. That's a cool robot. The boy didn't respond, pressing further back into the alcove. I have a daughter named Emma, Marcus continued, keeping his voice calm and conversational. She's 7, loves to draw. She's upstairs with your mom right now, probably showing her sketches of the fancy party we were at. A flicker of interest crossed Thomas's face. My mom. She's been looking everywhere for you, pretty worried. But I told her you were smart, that you'd find somewhere safe to wait. Marcus shifted slowly, sitting cross-legged in the tunnel to appear less threatening. This was a good hiding spot. Warm, dry, and those ventilation grates let in light during the day, right? Thomas nodded. Minutely. I could hear people calling, but you were scared to come out, Marcus finished. Want to tell me what happened? The story came in fragments. An older boy's bullying about his robot, threats to break it, Thomas's decision to hide until school ended. But then he'd gotten turned around in the tunnels, and the more he heard people searching, the more frightened he became that he'd be in trouble. "I just wanted to go home," Thomas whispered, "but I couldn't find the way back up." "Well, here's the thing," Marcus said, pulling out his radio. "I know the way out, and your mom's not mad. She just wants you safe. Think you can trust me to get you back to her?" Thomas clutched his robot tighter. "You promise she's not angry?" "I promise she's going to be the happiest mum in the world to see you." Marcus held out his hand. "Come on, Thomas, let's get you home." Slowly, cautiously, the boy uncurled from his hiding spot. His hand, when it finally took Marcus's, was small and cold but trusting. Marcus keyed his radio with his free hand. "Cooper, this is Marcus. I've got him. We're coming up." The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of Marcus's apartment, illuminating the same worn furniture and water-stained ceiling that had greeted him every day for the past 2 years. But something felt different. The weight that had pressed on his chest for months, that crushing sense of failure and inadequacy, had lifted slightly. Emma sat at their small kitchen table, carefully coloring a picture while eating cereal. She'd been full of questions on the ride home last night, fascinated by the police cars and the glimpse she'd caught of Thomas reuniting with his mother. That moment, Victoria Meridian dropping to her knees in the school parking lot gathering. Her son into her arms with sobs of relief would stay with Marcus forever. "Do you think the sad lady is happy now?" Emma asked, not looking up from her drawing. "I think she's very happy," Marcus assured her, pouring himself coffee from their temperamental machine. "Sometimes people just need help finding what they've lost." The phone rang, startling them both. Their landline rarely rang anymore. Most people who mattered had his cell number, and he'd long since stopped hoping for callbacks from potential employers. "Whitfield residence," he answered, expecting a telemarketer. "Mr. Whitfield, this is Patricia Haverford from Meridian Industries Human Resources." Marcus's grip tightened on the receiver. "Yes? Ms. Meridian asked me to contact you immediately. We have an employment opportunity we'd like to discuss. Would you be available to come to our offices this morning?" For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. After 6 months of form rejections and unreturned calls, the words didn't quite compute. "Mr. Whitfield?" "Yes," he managed. "Yes, I'm available." "Excellent. Shall we say 10 o'clock? I'll email you the details and parking validation information." After hanging up, Marcus stood frozen in his kitchen, afraid to believe what had just happened. Emma looked up from her drawing. "Was that about a job, Daddy?" "Maybe," he said carefully, not wanting to build her hopes prematurely. They'd both been disappointed too many times. "We'll see." But his hands shook as he retrieved his best shirt from the closet, the one he'd been saving for interviews that never came. Emma helped him with his father's cufflinks again, her small fingers steady and sure. "You'll get it," she said with the certainty only a child could muster. "You found the lost boy. They need someone who can find things." Mrs. Chen was delighted to watch Emma, practically pushing Marcus out the door with encouragement in 3 languages. The bus ride to Meridian Industries felt surreal. The gleaming tower that had seemed so forbidding last night, now representing possibility. The HR office occupied the 15th floor, all glass walls and modern furniture that probably cost more than his annual rent. Patricia Haverford turned out to be a polished woman in her 50s who treated him with a professional courtesy that felt foreign after months of dismissive interviews. "Before we begin," she said, settling behind her desk, "I should clarify that while Ms. Meridian did ask me to contact you, this is a legitimate position based on your qualifications. We've reviewed your work history at Autotech, particularly your infrastructure analysis projects." "I appreciate that," Marcus said, though he suspected his qualifications had less to do with this meeting than the previous night's events. Patricia pulled up his resume on her tablet. "Systems analysis, security infrastructure, efficiency optimization. Impressive project list. Can you tell me why you left Autotech?" "Downsizing," Marcus replied simply. "They eliminated our entire department when they shifted focus to software-only solutions. Their loss, from what I can see." She swiped through several screens. The position we're considering is Senior Systems Analyst in our Operations Division. You'd be responsible for evaluating our physical infrastructure across multiple facilities, identifying inefficiencies and security vulnerabilities. The salary she quoted made Marcus's head spin. With benefits, childcare assistance, and educational support, it was more than he dared hope for, even in his most optimistic moments. The position requires some travel to our satellite offices. Patricia continued, "Would that be a problem with your family situation?" "My daughter," Marcus began, then stopped. "The childcare assistance you mentioned?" "Full coverage at our on-site facility, which has extended hours for employees who travel. It's an excellent program. Several of our executives use it." Marcus thought of Emma, of the opportunities this could provide her. Dance lessons, art classes, college savings, all the things he'd watched slip away with each rejection letter. "When would the position start?" "Immediately if you're interested." Miss Meridian was quite specific about expediting this process. Patricia leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Whitfield, I've been in HR for 20 years. I've seen many hiring decisions, some better than others. This one feels right. Your technical skills are exactly what we need, and last night you demonstrated something we can't teach: initiative and compassion. Meridian Industries values both." Marcus's throat tightened. "Then yes, I'm very interested." The paperwork seemed to take forever, each form a small victory over months of defeat. Background, check authorization, tax documents, benefit selections, the mundane details of employment that felt like miracles. Patricia walked him through everything patiently, as if sensing how overwhelming it all was. "There is one more thing," she said as they finished. "Ms. Meridian asked if you could stop by her office before you leave. 20th floor, her assistant. Andrea will be expecting you." The executive floor was even more impressive than HR, all marble and mahogany with views that stretched across the city. Andrea, the suspicious assistant from the night before, greeted him with noticeably more warmth. "Mr. Whitfield, she's finishing a call, but please go in." Victoria's office could have swallowed Marcus's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, and original artwork adorned the walls. But his attention went immediately to the woman behind the massive desk, who looked remarkably different from both the polished CEO of last night's gala and the desperate mother in the parking lot. She wore a simple business suit, her hair pulled back in a practical style. The shadows under her eyes remained, but there was a lightness to her expression that hadn't been there before. "Marcus," she said, standing as he entered. "Please sit. How's Emma?" "She's well, thank you." Drawing pictures of police cars and asking when she can meet Thomas properly. Victoria smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Thomas would like that. He doesn't have many friends his age. Too advanced for his classmates, too young for the program suited to his abilities." She moved to sit in the chair beside him rather than behind her desk, a gesture that felt deliberately informal. "I owe you more than I can express," she said simply. "The police told me they would have found those tunnels eventually, but eventually could have been too late. Thomas was dehydrated, frightened, but unharmed, thanks to your intervention." "I just applied what I knew," Marcus said, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Any parent would have done the same." "No," Victoria said firmly, "they wouldn't have. 30 people in that ballroom heard me describe my son's behavior. You were the only one who truly listened, who connected it to actionable intelligence. That's a rare skill, Marcus, one we desperately need at Meridian." She stood, moving to the windows. "I built this company on the principle that innovation comes from unexpected places. Last night reminded me of that. You saw what others missed. Not because you had special training or insider knowledge, but because you paid attention, because you cared." "Ms. Meridian?" "Victoria," she corrected. "In this office, at least. I understand Patricia has made you an offer, a very generous one. Standard for the position, actually, though I may have insisted on expediting the process." She turned back to him. I won't pretend this is purely altruistic. We need someone with your skills and perspective, but I also believe in acknowledging when someone changes your life. You gave me back my son, Marcus. Let me give you back a career. Marcus stood, extending his hand. Thank you for the opportunity, for trusting a stranger. I won't let you down. Victoria shook his hand, her grip firm. I know you won't. Welcome to Meridian Industries, Marcus. I have a feeling you're going to find things here we didn't even know were lost. 3 weeks into his new position at Meridian Industries, Marcus had discovered something extraordinary. He was good at his job, not just competent, not just adequate, but genuinely skilled at seeing what others missed. The years of rejection had made him doubt his abilities, but here, surrounded by challenges that matched his expertise, he flourished. His office, still a marvel to him, with its window view and actual door, had become command central for a comprehensive infrastructure review. Blueprints covered every surface, marked with his neat annotations. He'd already identified 17 areas of significant energy waste and 3 serious security vulnerabilities that had gone unnoticed for years. Whitfield, you got a minute? David Reeves, the operations director, stood in his doorway. In their first meeting, David had been skeptical of the charity hire, as Marcus had overheard him describe it. That skepticism had evaporated after Marcus's first presentation. What can I help you with, David? This report on the subsidiary offices. You're saying we could cut utility costs by 30%? 35, actually. Marcus pulled up the data on his screen. The Burlington facility is running HVAC systems from the 90s. The Phoenix office has solar potential they're not utilizing. Simple upgrades, relatively low initial investment, significant long-term savings. David whistled low. How did our previous analysts miss this? Marcus had theories about that. Previous analysts who'd never worked with their hands, who viewed buildings as abstractions rather than living systems. But he kept those thoughts to himself, sometimes fresh. Eyes help, he said diplomatically. Fresh eyes, David repeated, grinning. Right. Keep this up and Victoria's going to promote you before your 90-day review. After David left, Marcus returned to his analysis of the headquarters building. He'd been studying the executive floor's security protocols, finding gaps that concerned him. Not urgent threats, but vulnerabilities that someone with ill intent could exploit. He made notes to discuss with Victoria at their next meeting. His computer chimed with a calendar reminder. Pick up Emma at 5:30. The on-site childcare had been another revelation. Emma loved the program, making friends with other employees' children, and thriving in the structured but creative environment. Mr. Whitfield? Andrea appeared at his door. Ms. Meridian would like to see you when you have a moment. These impromptu meetings had become regular occurrences. Victoria valued his insights, often calling him in to provide perspective on problems outside his official purview. He'd learned to read her moods, the slight furrow between her eyebrows when she was puzzling through a challenge, the way she twisted her pen when processing new information. Victoria's office was bathed in afternoon light, transforming the space into something warmer than its usual corporate elegance. She stood at her whiteboard, covered in financial projections and strategic plans. Marcus, good. I need your perspective on something. She gestured to a section of the board. The Kellerman acquisition. The numbers work, but something feels off. Marcus studied the information, letting his mind process not just the data, but the patterns beneath. Their maintenance records, he said after a moment. When I reviewed their facilities report, there were gaps. Regular maintenance that should have been done but wasn't documented. Deferred maintenance to inflate profit margins. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Possibly. Or they're hiding bigger structural issues. Either way, the buildings are likely worth less than the assessment suggests. Victoria made rapid notes. I'll have forensic accounting dig deeper. Good catch. She turned to face him fully. How are you settling in? I know the corporate world can be an adjustment. It's been good, Marcus said honestly. Better than good. I'd forgotten what it felt like to contribute meaningfully. I understand that feeling, Victoria said softly. After my divorce, I threw myself into work, partly because it was the only place I felt competent. Being a CEO is easier than being a single parent. It was the most personal admission she'd made during their professional interactions. Marcus recognized the gesture of trust and reciprocated. The hardest part is the guilt. Even now, with Emma in excellent care and our lives stabilizing, I feel guilty for the month she watched me struggle. She watched you persevere, Victoria corrected. That's a valuable lesson. Thomas told me the other day that he wants to be brave like the man who found him. You gave both our children an example of courage. Their eyes met and held for a moment, longer than professionally appropriate. Marcus felt something shift in the air between them, a recognition of shared experiences and mutual respect that went beyond employer and employee. Speaking of the children, Victoria said, redirecting gracefully, Emma and Thomas have been requesting a play date. Would Saturday work? We could meet at Riverside Park. Neutral territory, she added with a slight smile. Emma would love that. Marcus agreed, choosing not to examine too closely why the prospect of a Saturday afternoon with Victoria made his pulse quicken. The rest of the week passed in a blur of productivity. Marcus's findings on the subsidiary offices led to an emergency board meeting where his recommendations were approved unanimously. He was asked to lead the implementation team, his first major leadership role since Autotech. Friday afternoon found him in the break room, reviewing contracts when Jennifer from accounting sat down across from him. So you're the miracle worker everyone's talking about, she said with a friendly smile. The guy who found the CEO's kid and is now saving the company millions. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I'm just doing my job, right? And I'm just pushing. Numbers? Jennifer leaned forward conspiratorially. Word of advice, don't downplay your achievements here. This place rewards excellence. Own it. It was advice that went against every instinct developed during months of rejection, but Marcus recognized its wisdom. In this environment, competence wasn't threatening. It was valued. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's teacher at the childcare center. Emma drew you a picture. She's very proud and can't wait to show you. Marcus smiled, imagining his daughter's excitement. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't dreading the weekend, wasn't spending every moment worried about money or opportunities. He had work that challenged him, colleagues who respected him, and a future that held promise rather than just uncertainty. Mr. Whitfield? He looked up to find Thomas Meridian standing uncertainly at the break room entrance, still in his school uniform. The boy had his mother's intelligent eyes, but a gentler demeanor. Thomas, are you here with your mom? The boy nodded, then stepped closer. I wanted to say thank you for finding me. Mom says you knew where to look because you understand buildings. I understand being scared too, Marcus said gently. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help when we need it. Thomas considered this seriously. Emma says you're teaching her about buildings. Could you teach me too? I'd be happy to. Maybe we can start tomorrow at the park. Thomas's face lit up. Really? That would be awesome. I'll bring my robot too. Show Emma. As the boy scampered off to find his mother, Marcus reflected on how profoundly his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he'd been invisible. Another failed job seeker, another struggling parent, another casualty of corporate downsizing. Now he was seen, valued, contributing. But more than that, he was beginning to see himself differently. Not as someone who had failed, but as someone who had endured. Not as charity case, but as an asset. The transformation wasn't complete. Years of rejection left deep marks. But for the first time in a long while, Marcus Whitfield believed in his own worth again. His computer chimed with another email, this one from Victoria. Excellent work on the Kellerman analysis. Your instincts were correct. Forensic accounting found 2.3 meters in deferred maintenance. Dinner Monday to discuss? My treat. And yes, this is a business dinner, mostly. Marcus read the message twice, noting the playful ambiguity of that final word. He thought of their conversation earlier, the moment of connection over shared struggles. Whatever was developing between them would be complicated. Workplace dynamics, their children, their individual healing processes all factored into the equation. But as he gathered his things to collect Emma, Marcus allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, some complications were worth exploring. He'd spent so long feeling invisible that being truly seen by Victoria, by his colleagues, by himself, felt like stepping into sunlight after a long, dark winter. "Daddy!" Emma's voice rang out as he entered the childcare centre. She ran to him, picture clutched in her hand. "Look! I drew our new life!" The drawing showed their family of 2, but now they stood in front of a tall building under a bright sun. And there, sketched with a child's honest perception, were 2 more figures joining them, a woman with red hair and a boy with a robot. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said, his throat tight with emotion. The presentation room hummed with tension as Marcus stood before the assembled board of directors, his comprehensive efficiency report displayed on the screen behind him. 6 months into his role at Meridian Industries, he'd uncovered enough cost-saving opportunities to fund a small country's budget. But it was the security vulnerabilities in their Asian manufacturing facilities that had triggered this emergency meeting. "In summary," Marcus said, advancing to his final slide, "implementing these changes across all facilities will require an initial investment of $12 million, but will save the company $47 million over the next 3 years while significantly improving our security posture." Board member Richard Kellerman, the same whose acquisition Marcus had helped derail, leaned forward. "Mr. Whitfield, these oversights you've identified, how did our previous security consultants miss them?" "They focused on digital infrastructure," Marcus replied evenly. "I look at physical systems. Sometimes the most sophisticated hackers use the simplest entry points, an unsecured maintenance door, an outdated HVAC system that provides building access. Technology is only as strong as the structures that house it." Victoria, seated at the head of the table, had remained silent throughout his presentation, but Marcus could read the satisfaction in her posture. She championed this review against significant resistance. "The board will need to discuss this," announced Chairman Harrison. "Mr. Whitfield, thank you for your thorough work." Marcus gathered his materials, catching Victoria's subtle nod of approval as he left. In the hallway, he nearly collided with Andrea, who was juggling tablets and phones with her usual efficiency. "Strong presentation," she said, surprising him. Their relationship had evolved from suspicion to mutual respect. "She's in back-to-back meetings until 6, but she wanted me to ask if you're still available for dinner tonight." Their Monday dinners had become a tradition, ostensibly to discuss work, increasingly personal as the weeks passed. "Tell her yes. Rosario's at 7. I'll make the reservation." Andrea paused. "Marcus, she trusts you. That's not something Victoria does easily. Don't let her down." The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders as he returned to his office. His desk phone was already ringing. David Reeves with congratulations, Jennifer from accounting with budget questions, 3 department heads wanting to schedule meetings. 6 months ago, he'd been unemployed and invisible. Now he was integral to operations, his insights valued and sought after. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway, escorted by one of the childcare staff. "Daddy, are you busy? I finished my homework and Ms. Lisa said I could visit if you weren't in a meeting." "Never too busy for you, sweetheart." He lifted her onto his lap, showing her the building schematics on his screen. "See this? It's like a map of the building, showing all the secret passages and important parts." Emma studied the diagrams seriously. She'd inherited his analytical mind, often surprising him with her observations. "Is this why you've been traveling? To look at other buildings?" "Exactly right, making sure they're safe and efficient. Like How you made our apartment better, Emma said proudly. She was right. Their living situation had improved dramatically. Not just the new apartment in a better neighborhood, but the sense of security that came with stable employment. Emma had her own room now, filled with art supplies and books, her drawings covering the walls. Ms. Victoria's building is the safest, right? Emma asked. Because Thomas is here? Marcus smiled at her protective instinct. The friendship between Emma and Thomas had become one of the unexpected joys of this new life. All our buildings are safe, but yes, I pay extra attention to this one. His computer chimed with an email from Victoria. Board approved everything. Kellerman actually called you indispensable. Celebration warranted. Still on for dinner. Marcus typed back. Wouldn't miss it, fair warning. Emma's made something for Thomas. Prepare for glitter. Her response came quickly. Thomas has been building something for Emma all week. Engineering minds think alike. See you at 7. That evening, Rosario's warm lighting cast a golden glow over their corner table. Victoria had arrived first, already nursing a glass of wine, her business armor replaced with a softer cashmere sweater that brought out the green in her eyes. 47 million in savings, she said as he sat down. Do you know what the board usually expects from efficiency reviews? 5, maybe 10% improvements. You delivered 35? The inefficiencies were already there. Marcus deflected. Stop. Victoria held up a hand. We've talked about this. Own your achievements, Marcus. You've transformed our operations in 6 months. That's not luck or coincidence. That's skill. The waiter appeared, and they ordered with the ease of routine. Victoria's salmon, Marcus's pasta arrabbiata, shared appetizers they'd debate over. These dinners had become an oasis of honest conversation in their carefully structured professional relationship. Thomas asked if you could teach him about structural engineering, Victoria said after the waiter left. He's fascinated by your work. I think you've replaced Tony Stark as his hero. He's a brilliant kid. His questions about load-bearing calculations last weekend were graduate level. He gets that from his father, Victoria said, then grimaced. Richard called today. Wants to renegotiate custody terms now that he's remarried. Marcus had learned to navigate these revelations about her ex-husband carefully. How do you feel about that? Conflicted. Thomas needs his father, but Richard's interest seems tied to his new wife's desire to play family. She's 26, Victoria added with a bitter laugh. Younger than some of my junior executives. Emma asked me once if she'd get a new mom, Marcus offered. I told her that her mother would always be her mother, but our hearts were big enough to love additional people if the right ones came along. Victoria's expression softened. That's beautiful and true. Sarah must have been extraordinary to inspire such devotion. She was, but she also believed in moving forward. The last thing she said, Marcus paused, surprised by the ease of sharing this. She told me not to close my heart, that Emma would need to see me capable of joy again. Their food arrived, providing a natural break in the conversation, but the atmosphere had shifted, charged with unspoken possibilities. They discussed the implementation timeline for his recommendations, debated strategies for the Asian facilities, but underneath ran a current of something more personal. Can I ask you something? Victoria said as they shared tiramisu. That night at the gala, what made you approach me? 100 people heard my speech, but you acted. Marcus considered the question. I saw a parent in crisis. Everything else, your position, the setting, the social dynamics, faded away. You were just a mother who needed help finding her child. You saw me, Victoria said quietly. Not the CEO, not the wealthy divorcee, not the social figure. Just me. I think we see each other, Marcus replied, meeting her gaze steadily. The moment stretched between them, fragile and full of potential. Then Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her nanny, and the spell broke. Thomas is requesting video proof that I'm actually eating dinner and not working, she said with a rueful smile. The trials of raising a child who understands scheduling. They finished dinner with lighter conversation, but something had fundamentally shifted. As they waited for their cars outside the restaurant, Victoria turned to him. "Marcus, I need to say something. These dinners, our collaboration, the way you are with Thomas, it's becoming important to me in ways that go beyond professional appreciation." "I know," he said simply. "Me too. But we have to be careful. There are the children to consider, the workplace dynamics, my position, your career." "Victoria," he gently interrupted, "we're both analytical people. We can list 100 reasons why this is complicated, but maybe that's why it could work. We understand complexity, we're patient, we put our children first. Those aren't obstacles, they're proof we're capable of handling this responsibly." She looked at him for a long moment, vulnerability and hope warring in her expression. "Friday night, would you and Emma like to have dinner at our house? Just the four of us. No pretense of business." "We'd love that." As his car arrived, Victoria placed a hand on his arm. "Marcus, thank you for seeing me, for being patient while I remember how to be seen." Driving home, Marcus reflected on the barriers they were carefully, cautiously breaking down. Professional and personal, past and future, his and hers becoming, perhaps, theirs. Emma was still awake when he arrived home, working on her gift for Thomas, a detailed drawing of his robot with architectural annotations she'd asked Marcus to help her add. "Is Miss Victoria nice to you, Daddy?" she asked as he tucked her in. "Very nice. Why do you ask?" "Because you smile more after dinner with her. The real smile, not the trying to be okay smile." Marcus kissed his perceptive daughter's forehead. "You're right, she does make me really smile." "Good," Emma said decisively. "You deserve real smiles, and so does she." The boardroom had never felt more imposing than it did this morning. Marcus stood at the head of the polished table, watching directors file in for what could be the most important presentation of his career. 8 months at Meridian Industries had led to this moment, his comprehensive proposal to revolutionize their entire operational structure. Victoria entered last, offering him a subtle nod of encouragement before taking her seat. They'd maintained careful professional boundaries since their dinner conversation 2 weeks ago, but the awareness between them had only intensified. Their Friday family dinners had become a cherished routine, islands of warmth in their demanding schedules. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was proposing, "what I'm presenting today isn't just an efficiency upgrade. It's a complete reimagining of how Meridian Industries operates." The lights dimmed as his presentation illuminated the screen. Months of analysis, site visits, and strategic planning condensed into 45 minutes that could transform the company or end his career if he'd miscalculated. "Our current structure treats each facility as an independent entity," he explained, advancing through slides that showed heat maps of inefficiency. "This creates redundancies, communication gaps, and missed opportunities. My proposal integrates all operations into a unified system that could increase efficiency by 42% while reducing overhead by 60 million annually." Richard Kellerman, who'd become an unexpected ally, leaned forward. "The initial implementation cost, 85 million over 18 months, Marcus replied. "But we'll see returns within the first year and full ROI in under 3 years. "This is ambitious," Chairman Harrison observed, studying the projections. "It would require restructuring departments that have operated independently for decades." "Change is never comfortable," Marcus acknowledged, "but our competitors are already moving in this direction. We can lead or follow." Board member Patricia Wong raised a concern about employee displacement. Marcus was ready. He'd anticipated every objection, prepared for every challenge. His proposal included retraining programs, transition support, and growth opportunities that would actually increase their workforce in strategic areas. For 30 minutes, he fielded questions with growing confidence. This wasn't the desperate man who'd stood outside this building clutching rejection letters. This was someone who understood his worth, who'd proven his value repeatedly. "Mr. Whitfield," Harrison finally said, "would you give us the room to discuss?" Marcus gathered his materials, catching Victoria's eye as he left. Her expression was unreadable, but he thought he saw pride beneath the professional mask. The weight in his office felt eternal. Emma had made him a good luck card that sat propped on his desk, a drawing of him as a superhero fixing buildings. He smiled at her faith in him, drawing strength from it as minutes ticked by. His phone buzzed. "Andrea, they're ready for you." The walk back to the boardroom felt like crossing a bridge between who he'd been and who he was becoming. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Victoria stood by the windows, her back to the room, while the board members wore expressions of cautious excitement. "Mr. Whitfield," Harrison announced, "the board has voted. Your proposal is approved with full funding." Relief flooded through Marcus, followed quickly by determination. This was just the beginning. Now came the real work of implementation. Furthermore, Harrison continued, given the scope of this project, the board is creating a new position, Vice President of Integrated Operations. The role is yours, if you want it. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. From unemployed to VP in 8 months. It seemed impossible. But Victoria had turned from the windows, her smile radiant and genuine. Yes, thank you. I accept." Handshakes and congratulations followed. Kellerman clapped him on the shoulder. Wong discussed implementation timelines, but Marcus was most aware of Victoria maintaining professional distance, even as her eyes conveyed more personal celebrations. Later, after the board had dispersed and the building had quieted into late afternoon lull, Marcus found himself in Victoria's office. She'd loosened the corporate armor, jacket draped over her chair, hair escaping from its careful arrangement. "VP of Integrated Operations," she said, pouring 2 glasses of the whiskey she kept for special occasions. "How does it feel?" "Surreal," Marcus admitted, accepting the glass. 8 months ago, I couldn't get interviews for entry-level positions. 8 months ago, the business world was blind to what you could offer. She raised her glass. "To seeing potential where others see." Problems, they drank, the whiskey burning pleasantly. Victoria moved to the windows, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "When the board discussed your appointment, Kellerman asked if our personal relationship influenced my recommendation." Marcus tensed. "What did you say?" "The truth, that your work stands on its own merit, that you've saved this company millions and identified opportunities no one else saw, that you earned this position through competence and innovation." She turned to face him. "I also told them that yes, we've developed a personal friendship, and that I recused myself from the final vote to avoid any appearance of impropriety." "Thank you," Marcus said, understanding the delicate balance she maintained. "I never want anyone to think—" "Marcus," she stepped closer, "everyone in that room knew you deserved this. Your proposal was brilliant, revolutionary, the kind of thinking that builds dynasties." Her voice softened. "I'm proud of you, as your CEO, as your colleague, and as someone who cares about you deeply." The air between them crackled with possibility. Marcus set down his glass, decision crystallizing. "Victoria, these past months—" Her phone rang, shattering the moment. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "Thomas's school. I should take it," Marcus said immediately. "I need to get Emma anyway." But as she answered, her expression shifted from concern to relief. "He won first place in the regional science fair? Yes, I'll be right there." She hung up, joy transforming her features. "Thomas won with his adaptive robotics project, the one you helped him refine the calculations for. He did all the work, I just helped with the math. You mentored him, encouraged him, showed him that brilliance paired with kindness is the most powerful combination." She grabbed her jacket. "Come with us to celebrate?" Emma, too. He specifically asked if his engineering family could come. The phrase engineering family hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. Marcus nodded. We'd be honored. As they left the office together, Marcus reflected on the presentation that had changed his professional trajectory. But it was the personal connections, the careful, tentative building of something that might be a family, that felt like the true victory. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's after-school program, including a photo of her holding a certificate. Student of the month for helping others with their math homework, he showed Victoria, who smiled with genuine warmth. Like father, like daughter, building others up while rising themselves. They're good kids, Marcus said simply. They have good parents, Victoria replied, then seemed to catch herself. Parents, you know what I mean. He did know. In the elevator, standing carefully apart as professional protocol demanded, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future where such distance wasn't necessary, where board presentations could end with proper celebrations, where their children's achievements could be celebrated as a family without careful qualifications. Marcus, Victoria said as they reached the parking garage. Friday dinner is at your place this week, right? If you don't mind takeout. I'm a disaster in the kitchen. I'll cook, she offered. It's been too long since I made a meal that wasn't catered or restaurant delivered. Would that be okay? The thought of Victoria Meridian, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, cooking in his modest kitchen should have seemed absurd. Instead, it felt like coming home. More than okay, he said. Perfect. The Meridian Industries annual company picnic sprawled across Riverside Park like a small village, complete with carnival games, food trucks, and a stage for live entertainment. Hundreds of employees and their families enjoyed the perfect September afternoon, but Marcus only had eyes for one small drama unfolding by the playground. Emma and Thomas sat side by side on a bench, heads bent together over his latest invention, a small drone they'd been perfecting for weeks. Their collaboration had become seamless, Emma providing artistic insight while Thomas handled the technical aspects. Watching them work together with such natural harmony made Marcus's chest tight with emotion. They're quite a team, Victoria said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of lemonade. She'd traded her usual designer clothes for jeans and a Meridian Industries t-shirt, her hair in a ponytail that made her look years younger. Scary, brilliant, both of them, Marcus agreed, accepting the drink gratefully. Thomas asked me yesterday if I thought MIT would accept a joint application in 10 years. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. These public events were the only times they allowed themselves to relax their careful professional boundaries, hidden in plain sight among hundreds of other employees. 10 months had passed since that first awkward interaction at the gala. 10 months of careful navigation, professional triumph, and personal connection building slowly, steadily, inevitably toward this moment. Marcus had removed Sarah's ring 2 weeks ago, placing it in a memory box with Emma's blessing. Mom would want you to be happy, his wise daughter had said, and Miss Victoria makes you laugh again. Marcus, Victoria said suddenly, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. We need to talk about something. His stomach clenched. Had he misread the signals? Had their careful balance finally tipped too far? The chairman pulled me aside yesterday. She continued. About us. Victoria, he approves, she said quickly, seeing his concern. Apparently, we're the worst-kept secret in the company. He said, and I quote, about damn time you found someone who sees you as more than a stock price. Relief flooded through Marcus. Andrea warned me months ago that people were starting to notice. My assistant, your advocate, Victoria mused. She threatened to lock us in a supply closet if we didn't figure things out soon. They found a quieter spot under an oak tree, far enough from the crowd for privacy, but still able to watch the children. The moment felt suspended in amber, precious and fragile. I know we agreed to keep things professional, Victoria began, her fingers nervously shredding her napkin. To focus on our work, our children, to not complicate things. But Marcus, But it's already complicated, he finished. We have dinner every Friday. Our children are best friends. You help me rediscover my professional worth, and I... What? What have I given you? Victoria looked at him with an expression so open it took his breath away. You gave me permission to be human again, to be vulnerable, to be a mother and a woman, not just a CEO. You see me, Marcus. The real me, that's everything. A burst of laughter from the playground drew their attention. Emma was teaching Thomas to cartwheel, both of them collapsing in giggles as he tumbled sideways. I stopped believing in second chances, Victoria said quietly. After Richard, after the divorce, I decided loving someone wasn't worth the risk. Better to be alone than betrayed again. Sarah's death taught me that love is always a risk, Marcus replied. But the alternative, closing yourself off, living in fear, that's not living at all. So what do we do? Victoria asked, vulnerability clear in her voice. How do we take this leap without damaging everything we've built? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching their children play. Then, with the same clarity that had helped him find Thomas in those tunnels, he knew, we be honest, he said simply. With ourselves, with our children, with everyone, we don't hide or apologize. We show them what it looks like when two people choose to build something together, carefully and intentionally. Victoria's hand found his, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. How many times had they almost held hands before? In pulling back, how many moments like this had they let slip away? The company, she started, will adapt. You've built a culture that values competence and integrity. We have both. The children are already family in every way that matters. We'd just be making it official. Official? Victoria's eyebrow arched, a smile playing at her lips. Marcus squeezed her hand. I'm an engineer. I think in blueprints and timelines. But I know this, what we're building deserves a solid foundation. No more almost, Victoria. No more careful distances. Daddy! Ms. Victoria! Emma's voice rang out. Come see! Thomas made the drone do a loop. They walked to the playground together, hands still linked, and Marcus felt the shift in the universe, small but seismic. Employees noticed, some smiling knowingly, others whispering, but mostly just accepting this development as natural and overdue. Finally! Thomas exclaimed when he saw their joined hands. Emma said you two were being silly about grown-up stuff. Sometimes grown-ups are slow learners, Victoria admitted, ruffling her son's hair. Does this mean we're going to be a real family? Emma asked with characteristic directness. Like all together? Marcus knelt to his daughter's level. Would you like that? Emma looked at Thomas. Some silent communication passing between them. We already are a family, she declared. You're just catching up. Later, as the picnic wound down and families began to leave, Marcus and Victoria supervised the children's final drone experiments. The sun painted the sky in pastels, and the moment felt both ending and beginning. I should warn you, Victoria said quietly. Dating a CEO comes with complications. Media attention, corporate scrutiny, my impossible schedule. I should warn. You, Marcus countered. Dating a man who notices every structural flaw comes with constant home improvement projects and detailed analyses of restaurant safety protocols. She laughed, leaning into his shoulder. I think I can handle that. Mom, Thomas called out, can Mr. Marcus and Emma come for dinner tonight? We want to plan our next invention. Victoria looked at Marcus, her expression soft. What do you think? Ready to stop pretending this is just about the children? Marcus thought of all the moments that had led them here, the desperate search in dark tunnels, the months of careful friendship, the slow rebuilding of trust and hope. He thought of Sarah's last words about not closing his heart, of Emma's drawings that always included 4 figures now. I've been ready for months, he admitted. I was just waiting for you. No more waiting, Victoria said firmly. No more careful, just us, building something together. As they gathered their things, Emma slipped her hand into Victoria's while Thomas walked beside Marcus, chattering about drone modifications. They looked like what they were becoming, a family born not of tradition, but of choice, of two broken halves creating something whole. "Hey, Victoria," Marcus said as they reached their cars. "Thank you for seeing potential where others saw problems, for taking a chance on a desperate father with nothing to offer but hope." Victoria stopped, turning to face him fully. "You were never desperate, Marcus. You were determined. There's a difference. And you had everything to offer. Integrity, brilliance, compassion. I just had the wisdom to recognize it." She kissed him then, there in the parking lot with their children cheering and the sunset painting everything gold. It wasn't their first kiss. That had been 3 weeks ago, stolen in a moment of weakness after a late planning session, but it was their first public kiss, their first kiss as a couple, rather than two people fighting inevitability. "Gross," Thomas announced cheerfully, "but also about time." "Definitely about time," Emma agreed. "Now can we go home? I'm hungry, and Ms. Victoria promised to teach me her secret spaghetti recipe." Home. The word hung in the air, redefined and expanded. Not just Marcus and Emma's apartment or Victoria and Thomas's penthouse, but something new they would build together. "Let's go home," Marcus agreed, the words feeling like a promise, a prayer, and a plan all at once. 1 year later, the Meridian Industries annual gala glittered with the same opulence as before, but for Marcus Whitfield, everything had changed. He stood in the same ballroom where his journey had begun, but now he belonged here, not as an interloper clutching charity tickets, but as the company's vice president of integrated operations and, more importantly, as part of the family that had transformed his life. "Daddy, hold still," Emma commanded, adjusting his bow tie with the precision she brought to all her tasks. At 8, she'd grown taller, but retained the wisdom that had always marked her as special. "There. Now you look perfect." Marcus caught their reflection in the mirror, his daughter in a deep blue dress she'd helped design herself, and him in a perfectly fitted tuxedo that no longer felt like armor against inadequacy. The man staring back at him bore little resemblance to the desperate father who'd stood outside this building counting rejection letters. "Are you nervous?" Emma asked, slipping her hand into his. "A little," he admitted. "Speaking in front of all those people is still challenging, but you're not alone," she reminded him. "We're all here." The truth of that statement warmed him more than any professional achievement could. They weren't alone anymore. Hadn't been, since that night when desperation and compassion had intersected in the most unexpected way. "5 minutes, Mr. Whitfield." Andrea appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, but smiling warmly. "Ms. Meridian asked me to check if you need anything." "Just my family," Marcus replied, and Andrea's smile widened. "They're waiting in the green room. Thomas insisted on showing you his acceptance letter one more time." Marcus laughed. Thomas had received early admission to an advanced mathematics program, the youngest student they'd ever accepted. The boy's brilliance, nurtured by love and stability, had flourished beyond even their high expectations. The green room buzzed with the controlled chaos of a family preparing for a public appearance. Victoria stood before a mirror, applying lipstick with steady hands, despite the magnitude of tonight's announcement. She wore an elegant black gown that managed to convey both authority and approachability, a balance she'd mastered in all aspects of her life. "There's my co-presenter," she said, catching his eye in the mirror. "Ready to tell our story?" "Our story," Marcus repeated, still marveling at how those words had evolved from impossible dream to lived reality. Thomas bounced over, acceptance letter clutched in his hand. "Mr. Marcus, Dad, look. They mentioned my drone project in the acceptance, the one we built together." "Dad." 6 months of family therapy had led to that natural transition, both children deciding on their own terms what to call their new parents. Emma still called Victoria by her first name, but the love behind it was unmistakable. "I'm so proud of you." Marcus told Thomas, meaning it with every fiber of his being. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real work starts now, Thomas finished, grinning. I know. You've taught me well. We've taught him well, Victoria corrected, joining them. Partnership, remember? Partnership. In business, in parenting, in the marriage they'd entered. 3 months ago, in a small ceremony, with just their children, Mrs. Chen, and a few close friends. The media had been respectfully excluded, though the business press had had a field day with the Power Couple Merger of the Year headlines. Places, everyone, Andrea called. It's time. They moved through the back corridors of the hotel, a family unit navigating together. Marcus remembered his first walk through these halls, feeling like an imposter in his borrowed confidence. Now, his steps were sure, his place certain. The ballroom doors opened, and they paused at the threshold. The same crystal chandeliers, the same elegant crowd. But Marcus's perspective had shifted entirely. He saw colleagues who respected his innovations, friends who'd celebrated their wedding, a community that had embraced their unconventional family. Before we go out there, Victoria said quietly, I want you all to know how grateful I am. For this family, for this chance at happiness I never thought I'd have again. Group hug, Emma declared, and they obliged, careful of formal wear, but generous with affection. Marcus felt Sarah's presence in that moment, not as a ghost or a weight, but as a blessing. She would have loved Victoria's strength, Thomas's brilliance, the way their broken pieces had fitted together to create something beautiful and whole. They separated as the lights dimmed and the CEO's entrance was announced. Victoria walked to the podium with confident grace, the crowd falling silent in anticipation. This year's gala celebrated not just corporate success, but the launch of the Meridian Foundation's new initiative, one that Marcus had helped design. Good evening, Victoria began, her voice carrying easily through the space. 1 year ago, I stood on this stage as a different person. Successful in business, perhaps, but broken in ways I couldn't admit. I told you about my missing son, about the fear that consumed me. What I didn't tell you was how that night would change everything. She gestured to Marcus, who joined her at the podium, Emma and Thomas, taking seats in the front row. This is Marcus Whitfield, Victoria continued. You know him as our VP of Integrated Operations, the man whose innovations have saved our company millions while making our workplaces safer and more efficient. But I know him as the stranger who heard a mother's cry for help and responded with competence and compassion. Marcus took the microphone, his voice steady, despite the hundreds of eyes upon him. I came to last year's gala as a failure. At least, that's how I saw myself. Unemployed, struggling, carrying rejection letters like scars. But sometimes our greatest failures position us for our most important successes. They told the story together, trading off naturally. The desperate search, the found child, the job offer that became so much more. The audience listened with rapt attention, many wiping away tears as the narrative unfolded. Which brings us to tonight's announcement, Victoria said, retaking control. The Meridian Foundation is launching the Second Chances Initiative, an program designed to identify talented individuals who've been overlooked by traditional hiring practices. Single parents, career changers, those dealing with life upheavals that don't fit neatly into corporate boxes. Because talent doesn't always come in expected packages, Marcus added. Sometimes it comes from a father who understands buildings because he's spent his life creating safe spaces for his daughter. Sometimes it comes from failure that teaches more than success ever could. The initiative details unfolded. Partnerships with community colleges, mentorship programs, childcare support, and pathway positions into corporate careers. It was everything Marcus had wished for during his months of unemployment, now made real for others. We're committing $50 million over 5 years, Victoria announced, to gasps from the crowd. Because we believe that investing in overlooked potential isn't charity, it's smart business. The applause was thunderous. Marcus saw his former Autotech colleague David Chen in the crowd, clapping enthusiastically despite having once dismissed him. Jennifer from accounting wiped away tears. Even the skeptical board members stood in ovation. As they left the stage, Emma and Thomas rushed to meet them, the family embracing in full view of everyone. Marcus caught sight of Mrs. Chen at a table near the front, placed there at Victoria's. Insistence, the woman who'd held their small family together during the darkest times, now beamed with grandmotherly pride. "Did we do good?" Emma asked, her voice muffled against Marcus's jacket. "We did good," Victoria confirmed, kissing the top of her daughter's head, because that's what Emma had become, just as Thomas had become Marcus's son, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the daily decision to be a family. Later, as the gala continued around them, the four of them found themselves on the terrace overlooking the city lights. The same stars that had witnessed Marcus's desperation. A year ago now shone on a family forged through trial and triumph. "Look," Thomas said, pointing to the Meridian Industries building gleaming in the distance. "Our building looks like a lighthouse. That's what good companies should be," Marcus reflected. "Beacons for those who are lost. Guides for those seeking their way." Victoria leaned into him, her warmth a comfort that still felt miraculous. "Speaking of guides, there's something we need to discuss with you two." Emma and Thomas exchanged glances, the telepathic communication of siblings who'd chosen each other as surely as their parents had. "Are you having a baby?" Emma asked with her characteristic directness. Victoria laughed, the sound bright against the night air. "No, sweetheart, but we are expanding our family in a different way. The foundation wants us to mentor a family in the program personally. Single parent, 2 children, recently relocated for a fresh start. Sound familiar? We get to help someone like Daddy helped us?" Thomas asked, excitement lighting his features. "Like we all helped each other," Marcus corrected gently. "That's how families work. We lift each other up." The party sounds drifted through the glass doors, but out here in their private bubble, Marcus felt the profound rightness of this moment. Every rejection had led him here. Every moment of despair had been preparing him to recognize and appreciate this joy. "I have something for you," Victoria said suddenly, producing a small wrapped box from her clutch. "Happy anniversary of the night that changed everything." Inside was a pair of cufflinks. Modern, elegant, but somehow reminiscent of his father's sterling silver ones. Engraved on each was a simple message: "For seeing what others miss, they're perfect," Marcus said, his throat tight with emotion. "There's one more surprise," Thomas announced, barely containing his excitement. "Emma and I have been working on something." Emma produced a folder from behind her back. Where had she been hiding it in that dress? Inside was a framed drawing, but this was no child's sketch. It showed their family of 4 standing before both the Meridian building and their home. But the real beauty was in the details. Every person they'd helped through the foundation was represented by a small figure, creating a constellation of connection, spreading outward from their central family. "It's called the ripple effect," Emma explained, "because when you help one person, it spreads out like ripples in water. My contribution is on the back," Thomas added. Marcus turned the frame over to find equations, complex calculations showing how a single act of kindness, when multiplied through corporate power and sustained effort, could theoretically impact thousands of lives. "You two are extraordinary," Victoria said, gathering both children close. "How did we get so lucky?" "It wasn't luck," Emma said seriously. "Daddy says luck is when preparation meets opportunity. We were all prepared to love each other. We just needed the opportunity." A knock on the terrace door interrupted them. Andrea appeared, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here who insists on speaking with Mr. Whitfield." A gentleman named James Morrison. Jake, his former colleague who'd given him the gala tickets that started everything. Marcus hadn't seen him since that night. "Send him out," Marcus said, curious despite himself. Jake appeared, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, older and somehow diminished. "Marcus," Ms. Meridian, I'm sorry to intrude. Jake, Marcus greeted him carefully. It's been a while. It has. Jake shifted nervously. I needed to tell you something. That night when I gave you those tickets, I almost didn't. My wife wasn't really sick. We didn't want to associate with someone who was... He trailed off, shame coloring his features. Struggling? Marcus finished quietly. I understand. No, you don't. Jake's voice grew urgent. I was cruel, dismissive. I gave you those tickets to ease my guilt, not out of kindness. But you took that throwaway gesture and turned it into this. He gestured helplessly at the family before him. I've watched your rise, the foundation announcement, and I realized I need to be better. To see people, really see them, the way you saw Ms. Meridian's pain that night. Marcus extended his hand. We all have the capacity to change, Jake. That's what second chances are about. Jake shook his hand gratefully, then retreated back to the party. The family stood in silence for a moment, processing the encounter. He's right, you know, Victoria said softly. You see people. It's your superpower. We all have superpowers, Thomas interjected. Mom runs companies. Dad fixes things. Emma understands hearts. And you innovate, Emma finished for him. Together we're like the Fantastic Four, but better because we're real. The gala was winding down, but their night was far from over. They had plans. Pizza at their favorite late-night spot, a tradition born from their first official family. Dinner, no champagne or caviar, could compare to sharing pepperoni pizza, while Thomas explained his latest invention and Emma sketched their adventures. As they prepared to leave, Marcus took one last look around the ballroom. Same space, same chandeliers, same marble floors, but he was entirely different. The struggling single father who'd entered these doors in desperation had been transformed by love, opportunity, and the willingness to see potential where others saw only problems. Ready to go home? Victoria asked, linking her arm through his. Home, a word that now encompassed so much more than four walls. It meant family dinners and homework help, bedtime stories and morning chaos, board meetings and ballet recitals, building something lasting together. I've been ready my whole life, Marcus replied. I just didn't know it until I found you all. They walked out together, CEO and VP, husband and wife, mother and father, a family that had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something extraordinary from the broken pieces of their pasts. Behind them, the gala continued, but ahead lay something far more precious. Tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, spent together. The ripples of their story would spread outward, touching lives they'd never meet, creating possibilities they'd never see. But at the center was this. Four people who'd learned that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, the ones you fight for, the ones you build with patience and love, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves a second chance. In his pocket, Marcus felt the weight of his father's cufflinks, now joined by Victoria's gift. Old and new, past and future, loss and love, all of it woven together into a life he couldn't have imagined but wouldn't trade for anything. "Race you to the car!" Thomas called out, already running. "No fair, you got a head start," Emma protested, chasing after him. Victoria laughed, kicking off her heels to run after their children, and Marcus followed, his heart full of gratitude for rejection letters that led to acceptance, for loss that led to love, for a desperate night that led to this perfect life. The circle was complete, but their story, their real story, was just beginning.